Hello, writers. Have you ever bought a writing craft book someone says you just have to read?
Is it still sitting on your shelf? Have you even cracked the spine?
That's totally me.
Don't ask Renee how many craft books she owns.
Why do we keep buying these books we never read?
We all want to improve as writers, but that's hard to do alone.
That's why we started the Words to Write By podcast, to tackle these books together, chapter by chapter, and learn from their advice.
Or not. Sometimes they're wrong.
Hi, I'm Renee Nelson, former college writing instructor turned full-time writer and podcaster. After many years, I finally have a complete draft of my memoir.
And I'm Kim Smugato, author of the humorous fantasy novel Our Comeback Tour is Slaying Monsters, which is the first book in the Boy Bands and Dragons series, released by Riverfolk Publishing.
And now, on with the podcast.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Words to Write By.
Hi, everybody.
So we're continuing with our AI writing tools series of podcasts, and today we are talking with an editor, Kristen Tate. If you've been listening to our podcast, we've had her on multiple times by now. She is an independent editor, and she does this amazing geeky literature analysis. She recently published a book called Novel Study: Decoding the Secrets and Structures of Contemporary Fiction. How are you doing today, Kristen?
I'm great. I'm so thrilled to be back on here. And as I was saying before we started recording, I love that y'all are doing this series. I think there's so much discussion of AI that's very black and white, and y'all are just going straight for the gray, and I love it. I think we need more discussion just like this.
Oh, thank you. Also, good to see you again.
Good to see y'all.
Can you start off by just telling us a little bit about what kind of editing services you provide and how you work with clients?
Yeah, so I do developmental editing, kind of / content editing, however you want to talk about it. That's when, someone comes to me with a usually finished, not always finished. Sometimes they can't quite get to the end, but, full manuscript and wants feedback on the big picture issues, kind of, are they hitting genre tropes? Is the plot working? Are the character arcs working? And then I also do copy and line editing, and that's that, sentence by sentence, really careful polishing. So I do both of those things. I work mostly with self-publishing authors, although I have a handful of folks who either are still trying to get that elusive traditional book deal or are already working with a traditional publisher. And often those folks just work with me doing developmental editing. And then because they're a publisher, this is the beautiful thing about traditional publishing, their publisher takes care of the copy editing.
Nice.
So have you been using AI tools in your editing work? And can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yes. So just to kind of start off with, for anyone working with authors or working with an editor, I think communication and consent are absolutely key. So that's kind of where I start. I have an AI policy. It's linked out in the contract I send to folks. And I work with folks who are on all ends of the spectrum. Some writers want an absolute firewall between their work and those tools, to the extent where there are a bunch of options in Microsoft Word that I have turned off. I can no longer use like their share file things because there's no guarantee actually that right now that program is not uploading things to their AI services.
Whoa.
We don't know. And I have had clients alert me to that and ask me to turn those off. So I have those off. And then I have clients who are using the tools in their own work. So I make sure that for every single client I work with, I know where they are on that spectrum. And if they do not want me to touch the tools in any way, then I don't. So that's to start off with. For clients who are open to it, again, it's kind of a spectrum. The next thing is like, are you comfortable with me using the tools, for example, can you use the term power thesaurus in an earlier episode? And I think of it that way when I'm line editing. So I'll just say, in this passage, I think the verb could be stronger. Can you give me 5 suggestions for a stronger verb? And it's faster than using a regular thesaurus, and it's not popping up like a noun phrase or something else that I don't want. So some authors are comfortable with me using it in that way, where I'm taking out a sentence at a time or asking it about something like that. And then I'm never copying the response. I'm using it to inspire my suggested line edit. And usually it's a word or two words that I'm kind of looking for there.
Just for a visual here. So what you do is you've got the document and you're working through it. And then if you change a word or you suggest a word, then it appears either in the comment section on the side or it says, Kristen changed this verb to this verb, sort of thing.
Exactly. It's using track changes. And so from the client's and from the author's end, it doesn't look any different from what I would usually do. Most of my changes are little changes like that at the word level. Sometimes there'll be, like an entire sentence is clunky. If I'm changing an entire sentence, I often will do that in a comment out to the side and I'll say, I had a hard time understanding this sentence because of X, Y, and Z. Here's an alternate phrasing that might like unlock ideas for you. Because I want them to see the idea of where I'm going with it and then take it and put it into their own words. Or sometimes they'll just take that whole sentence, but I like it out there in the side so it doesn't feel like I am trampling their manuscript too hard. So that's kind of one level of use. And I'm finding that, I don't know, maybe like 30% of folks I work with are fine with me doing that. And then I have maybe like a 10 to 25% of folks who are fine with me actually uploading their entire manuscript. So I like Claude for this because Claude is an AI tool that's made by Anthropic. Anthropic has a very clear and very defined privacy policy that says that they will not use any uploaded material to train future versions of the LLM. And that is important to me and is important to the authors I work with. So that's why I use that tool in particular. Now, if I can upload the manuscript, there are all kinds of time-saving things I can do. One of the best ways for using Claude is just for summary. And I mean, you both know, like these manuscripts, they're big, unwieldy, messy beasts. One of the hardest parts about revising is just wrapping your head around 100,000 words or even 50,000 words, right? We can't do it. We're not good at it. But Claude is great at it. So then I can use it for all kinds of summary. And these are things that often I will do kind of painstakingly myself, but it takes hours. But Claude can very quickly and easily generate, say, a chapter by chapter summary for me. If I'm doing copy edit, when you do a copy edit, you build what's called a style sheet, which lists all of your characters. And that's how you kind of catch, the correct spelling for someone's name and make sure it doesn't change or their hair color, all those things, and track the timeline. So you make sure that all lines up. I work on a lot of mysteries and thrillers, and often there's action that's, someone's at the stadium and they have to rescue this person who's been kidnapped, and like all of the action has got to line up, and we've got three different point of views. And if I can use Claude, to say, hey, I know right now this doesn't match up on the timeline. Can you look at chapters 20 through 26 and give me an hour by hour breakdown of everything that's happening in this, sequence, and flag the things that are not consistent? It will produce that report for me. And then I take that and I go back to chapter 20 and go through it and mark all those things up. And it's just a huge time saver. So those are kind of the two big ways I'm using it right now.
Have you ever taken a mystery and gone chapter by chapter and asked Claude if he can figure out who committed the crime at each stage?
Oh, I mean, I haven't. And I think that is, I mean, if I were an author, I think that's a really fun tool, right? Because then you kind of get that reader stand-in of like,
Have you given too many clues? Have you not given enough?
exactly, do I need another red herring? Or like, is the red herring working, or is it too obvious that it's a red herring? I mean, that's a great use.
So what you're saying here actually is that the way that Claude goes through a book is really the way a reader goes through a book too. Do you think it?
I mean, I think you can make Claude do that, right? I mean, I think you can make Claude do not anything, but many things, right? You can get it to kind of act as a reader stand-in. That said, I think that's still the thing also that Claude can't do, right? Like, so one of my jobs as an editor, especially if I'm doing developmental edit, but also for like a line edit, is to like pay attention to when I'm bored or confused. Either one of those things are really important. And then I stop myself and I think, is this just me? Do I just need more caffeine? Or is there actually something in the manuscript here that could be improved? If I'm bored, do we need more tension? If I'm confused, do we need more clarity or more detail? Or do we need more visuals or like sensory cues? So that's where I'm really leaning on my reader response. And I actually don't think Claude is good at that because Claude doesn't get bored and Claude is a yes man. So they go hand in hand. That said, the other way I'm using Claude and kind of training Claude to be more like a reader is I'm using, there's a feature called projects. And so you can feed all of these documents into it and also give it instructions. And I have different ones. I have one for line editing and I have one for developmental editing. And for like developmental editing, I have a lot of notes in there that, kind of drawing from my favorite craft books. I have kind of different chunks. I have a kind of basic explainer of like cause and effect in plots that I've developed over the years that often pops up in my editorial letter. So I have all of that stuff is already there in that project for Claude to draw on. And then in the instructions, I tell it how I want it to act. So, I say, I don't want you to like offer me a revision. I want you to kind of give me a summary of what's working and what's not working. Or if I'm given it a sample style sheet, and if I'm, trying to get it to kind of generate a style sheet to my specs, I tell it what I want and what I don't want. And then you already kind of have that in there and you have different flavors of Claude according to the projects you have set up.
Wow.
Right. Because I assume that you have a different approach when doing nonfiction versus fiction or.
Yeah, I don't work very much on nonfiction. When I'm working on nonfiction with Claude, I'm actually doing things like fact checking. I think, we hear so much about hallucinations, which is true. And like because Claude is a yes man and it wants to give you an A answer, especially if you're like asking it something fairly obscure, it will just make shit up because it wants to give you something. But if you are trying to like track down, like I'm, often working with authors who like will use a quote that they've drawn from another author's work as like an epigraph for each chapter. It takes a fair amount of work to like track those back down to the original source. And that's like kind of gold standard for copy editing. Like I want to see it in the book and make sure it's been quoted correctly and that it's verified. Like I caught one the other day that's like a quote that's been widely attributed to Mark Twain, but is actually just apocryphal.
Is it the one about the coldest winter he ever
In
spent
San
in the summer?
Francisco.
I think that one actually is
Yeah.
real.
Okay.
I forget
Oh,
what this one is about. It was something about like kind of grabbing life and not letting it pass you by. I forget what the exact words were, but when you have something detailed like that, Claude actually is pretty good. It's web connected now, and ChatGPT is quite good at this too. Go find me the original source, and then I can go back and actually check it. I usually Google Books usually to check it, but it just saves me a bunch of steps. So for nonfiction, I often use it as kind of like a research partner that gets me faster to the place where I can check it with a source that I consider reputable.
So the next thing I was going to ask about this, it kind of plays off of this and also in general. So it sounds like you really are bringing a lot of your editor experience to this whole project. One of the big concerns about AI is that it's eliminating jobs. And so some of the stuff you've discussed here, would a writer just be able to use these tools and then not use services of an editor? Do you think that is, and what pitfalls might they run into if they approach it that way?
That's a great question. I think for something like, say, proofreading, I think a lot of those jobs are going to go away. And honestly, that doesn't bother me too much. Obviously, I like humans should get paid. I want human editors to be around and get paid. But that's kind of like the most boring editing you can do. Like you're just trying to find typos. Where I think the AI tools are not good is anytime you need to, I think of it as like shifting the frame. Like I was listening to your example where you were working with Claude to kind of rewrite that passage about dwarves,
Mhm.
right? All good. What an editor can do is also say, do you need this passage at all?
Mhm.
Is it
Mm.
slowing down the chapter? What's the story reason for this passage to be in here? Why do we need to know about the dwarves right now? Claude's not going to ask you those questions because it's yes man, and also because you're coming to it with a different task. So I think that's the place, those big picture issues, any kind of like coaching stuff, you can use Claude as a coach if you are already really sure of where you need coaching. And often, like the most transformative coaching comes when someone shifts the frame and is like, okay, you're asking the wrong question. Here's the question you really should be asking. And I'm not sure that Claude is, or any of the AI tools are ever going to be great at that.
I wonder if they will come out with like professional editor mode where it starts getting more judgy and less of a yes man kind of thing. You probably would have to pay for that surface and also have a really thick skin, depending on how mean it can get.
Yeah, I mean, you can. I've heard of people doing that actually with like those custom instructions. Like, be very specific about like, don't agree with me all the time. Like, be meaner, be harsher. But again, like as an editor, I'm working for the author, but really ultimately both of us are working for the reader. And readers are human, and these tools are not human. They're kind of simulating humanness. And so I think any time when that's what we're hitting the limits of, or just trying to like tap into some kind of like really basic human emotion, how do I tap into like a reader's fear response? Like, how do I make this zombie novel scarier? Or how do I evoke the feeling of like warm community that like that's my favorite thing about like the found family trope, right? How do we dial that up? I'm not sure that Claude or any of the AI tools is always going to be able to help you find that solution because they're very human solutions. I think the other big problem that authors need to be aware of, any of us need to be aware of, is that Claude wants to hand us the most typical, common, generic, cliched response, right? That's kind of how it's built. These models are, they're kind of like a glorified autocomplete if you think about it. They're taking all these tokens and interpreting them and predicting what the next token should be. As authors, one of the things we're looking to do is like surprise and delight readers. And Claude's not really good at surprise and delight. Claude is good at saying the next expected verb would be this. It's really good at like correcting idioms. It's really good at feeding you like, you know, here's this plot. How should I end it? And giving you the 10 most common endings.
I like your comment about surprise and delight because you get delight out of surprise. Like one trick I have, I go to a bookstore and there'll be all these poetry books. It's probably a bad way to pick a poetry book, but this is how I do it. I just pick a random one off the shelf and I open it to a random page in the middle. And if I don't feel surprised after like the first like three stanzas, I'm like, nope. And I go to the next and I go to the next. And then I pull it down and I go, oh, I like this one. I look at the author. Oh, I've already got like four books of this. I'm like, somehow
I think that's a
it
great way to do it. I love it.
works. But it might also work for novels. I'm not sure. But I just like how language can delight and surprise, and not all novels do that. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. It's just that's what I'm looking for. And that is a limit to AI, right? Like it's maybe commercial fiction. I'm not even sure. Some commercial fiction is really delightful and surprising. So actually, I don't know. I might be making a blanket response, a judgment that I shouldn't be making. Yeah, you're right. There, it is definitely limited. It can't really tell what would really spark us or like spark those pleasure centers in our brain. It just goes, this is the most logical next step because I have all this stuff given to me and I'm just going to regurgitate it in a way that seems surprising, but not.
One thing that you can do though, like if you're stuck, you could kind of do that exercise of like, okay, I've got these steps of my plot. Um, what should come next? Give me 10 ideas. You can look at those ideas. Sometimes you can like identify, okay, this one is awful. And then like, why do I think it's so awful? And then sometimes that will actually spark a better
Mm.
idea. Or you can ask the question, what if this were opposite? Like that's a question I often recommend authors who are stuck go with. Like, what if this was opposite? What would opposite look like here? Because that sometimes is the way you can unlock the surprise and delight is like if you as a writer had no idea this is where the plot was going, then the reader's definitely not going to. And if you can pull off a flip at that point, it could be really cool, right? So sometimes it's just like the blank page you can't generate anything against. But if you've got a list, like even if you have something that's crap, you can then be like, okay, let me figure out like why this is not great. And now I can build something from this.
Do you help your clients with suggestions if they are open to using AI in the writing? Do you offer suggestions for how they might use it?
If they're open to it, I do. The one area where I'm kind of always just saying, like, just use an AI tool is writing the book description. Claude is shockingly good at this, and I'm actually not sure anyone is better. One of those things that's really hard to write. It's just like your back cover copy. It needs to like hit all of these kind of like sales tropes, and we're not necessarily good at doing that as authors. You need to get this like very specific combination of like big picture, like here's kind of the vibe of the book, and then concrete details that are going to lure your ideal readers in. And it's exactly the kind of writing that Claude is very, very good at because there are literally millions of models of like how to do this well. It works best if you upload your whole manuscript, and it works even better if you can say, my ideal readers also are fans of these five novels. So that's my most suggested thing, for self-publishing authors, even if they've had zero interest in using the tool up to that point, when they get to the point where they're struggling over that piece, which is often a piece too, where like the imposter syndrome and the like horror of like, oh my God, I'm gonna put this book up for sale and ask people to actually pay for it, and then they are going to read it and review it. Like the horror of that starts to set in, and people can become paralyzed. And often, like the book description is what's paralyzing them, but that's just the task. Like we just need to talk about like how they deal with like the horror of hitting publish, which is again like a human thing. Like often they need to talk to me or someone else, like a human and not an AI, about like, oh, actually, I'm having these really scary feelings about putting my work in the hands of readers. And it's just showing up and like having to write these like 300 words that's going to encapsulate your entire book that maybe you've been working on for years.
It's an irony that one of the things that authors, people that want to sell their book, agonize over is the pitch and how to present their thing. And they'll go back and forth, and people help out, a lot of feedback, this and this. And in a way, an AI actually is better at pitching your work than you yourself as a writer, even though you, the writer, wrote all the words, because the AI knows what words to communicate to the potential editor or agent that they want to hear.
Yes.
Authors are so keen on this special thing that their book does, and the agent isn't interested in that. They're interested in kind of like where they can put this book, and the AI knows where to put the book. And it's like the most critical step to getting yourself published is actually better done by an AI than by you.
Yeah, I think that's 100% correct. The other place that AIs are really good, they're really good at identifying the tropes in your novel that you might not even be aware of. And again, that's one of those things where like there's that balance between readers want to be surprised and delighted, but also they love the tropes they love. No one's going to ever get tired of the found family trope, ever. Like, you can't write enough books using that trope because it's just like a deep love that we have as readers. There's so many infinite variations of it. It's like ice cream. No one's ever going to be like, we've just done enough ice cream, like full stop. We're never eating this again. That's not how we're wired. Finding actually like the commonalities, the things that your book shares with other books that are beloved by readers, you want that. And Clyde is really good at pulling those out and saying like, okay, here are your tropes.
So we've had AI around for a while. In the last 9 months, year, it's really been ramping up. Do you notice a difference in the manuscripts that you get, either in general or for specific writers that that are maybe using more of the AI before they give you the manuscript?
Absolutely. And again, this is where kind of conversations come in. There are always going to be grifters, right? So there's always going to be like the level of people who are just trying, they don't really care about books. They don't care about readers. They don't care about stories. They don't have a story they want to tell. They just want to see if they can make a quick buck by like doing a like one click generation of an entire novel and throwing it up on Amazon and seeing if they can do something. Those people don't come to me, right? They're not going to pay me $2,000-$3,000 to edit their book. They're just not. So I just don't worry about those people. They've always been around in some form or another, and they're just still out there grifting. For everyone else, like I definitely have had authors who I start to realize, oh, they are leaning more into these tools, and I feel like their distinctive voice is getting lost. And when I've had those conversations, often it's because they want to give me a cleaner draft to edit.
Hmm.
So then we just have a conversation about it. Like I can identify your voice and like try to turn up that dial when I see it. I cannot manufacture it or produce it. Like that is all the author. That's the special sauce. So I would much rather have a book that has a very distinctive voice and perspective and be full of like grammar problems and like the commas are a mess because like I can clean up your commas, your grammar. I like will polish it so it's all completely correct. I can do that. It's harder. It's much harder for me to add the voice part. I think that's where authors really have to be careful. Just finding that line for themselves. It's so easy and it's so tempting to say, write me a paragraph about this. Often it's going to be flatter and more generic and less interesting than what you're going to come up with.
Yeah, it might be important to emphasize the fact that this, as much as it doesn't seem like it's just a tool, it is a tool. It is like a hammer. It is like a chainsaw or whatever. It's what you can do with it. It's the level of expertise that you can bring to it. I mean, if you know what prompts to ask it, if you know the flaws in your own work and you can ask it direct questions about fixing certain things, that could be really helpful. But if someone hands you a hammer and then you just pound a nail, well, yeah, I guess you did the job, but was it any good? Or you just give it to someone else. Like you're essentially taking the tool and having the tool do all the work for you.
Yep.
And then it's not really you anymore. And it's pretty obvious. Like we're really good at seeing that.
I think readers can sense it. I've been thinking about AI, like AI writing is like bread from a bread machine. Like, you remember like back in the 80s, like
Yeah.
everyone had that like counter bread machine and like the bread it was okay. It's always nice to have like fresh bread and you push a button and then it's easy, but it like was never great. It was never going to blow your
Right.
mind, that bread. And it feels to me a little bit like that. I have actually gotten pretty good at, I can definitely tell when I'm getting something that is AI written. I see it in emails actually a lot.
Hmm.
And I think this is another place where it's like good to just be using the tools because you start to get that radar as well. And sometimes, honestly, it's fine. Like if someone has written me an email that's kind of hard to write, I don't know, like sometimes you just need to send the email. And like, do we care that it's in the writer's voice? I don't know. It comes back to like you as a human. What are you getting out of the writing? Writing a novel is like it's an experience. I mean, I hate the journey metaphor, but like, okay, let's use it. You're taking a trip and you're going to be different on the other side of that trip. And if you're leaning too heavily on these tools, your trip is going to be less transformative. You might not like hit a traffic jam or like stay in that crappy motel with roaches, but like, I don't know, it's just going to be less interesting. So I think it just really comes back to what you want to get from your writing and then what you want your reader to get on that other end. So like if we keep the humans right there at the center, I think that can help be a guidepost for authors in terms of how they're using these tools.
As a teacher, it just reminds me of plagiarize. It happens every semester in every single class. It's always like two of them.
Yeah.
And you're like, you guys, I told you how easy it is for me to spot this. It's so easy. Do you think I read your entire essay to figure it out? No, it took me 2 sentences. I plugged it into Turnitin.com and ta-da! I knew it. I didn't even have to read the whole paper. I feel like there's going to be websites or people who get like, really good at it. Like you're getting really good at being able to tell what it is, being able to just go, this is AI generated. This is AI generated. Maybe I'm just like guessing here, but like, okay, it's a good book. It's really entertaining, but just know
Yeah.
that it's going to feel really wooden in a lot of places because of this problem.
Yeah. There's going to be a divide. And I just think there's always going to be a market for the artisan produced goods, right? So, it's like a big marketplace. Like there's also a marketplace for like, I don't know, generic white bread hamburger buns, right? We need it all.
Yeah.
That's kind of the issue is that there are a lot of generic books out there, and there are a lot of books that when you get right down to the writing could be a lot better. In the case of standard plagiarism for writing an essay, there are certain things that they do that really are detectable, but I think that there are certain writers out there, or there are certain styles that we've got that we aren't going to be able to detect if an AI was writing it or not. I think this kind of assumption that we'll always be able to tell is what's going to get us completely suckered by some book that we all love and then are horrified to realize that no, it was AI generated.
Yeah. Good point.
Yeah. And I'm not sure that is like the right way. If you're like, like totally clenched up about it, like, oh, my radar is always on, that way lies madness.
Yeah. That way lies madness. Yes. I don't know. It was like 4 podcasts ago. I was like, I bet there's going to be people who are like, I don't read any books past 2026. Like anything written after 2026, there's so many books out there that came out before. That's my cutoff date.
Sure.
I don't know.
Do you have any lines that as an editor you will not use AI for, or something where you just decided that, I'm going to go up to this line, but after that point, they're paying me for my services. I'm not going to cross that line, even if perhaps the AI might be better at it than me.
Yeah, that's a great question. So for developmental editing, if someone is open to me using the tool, I will ask it for summaries. I do not ask the AI what it thinks is good, bad, working, not working in the novel. An author can do that themselves right now and just go use Claude, and that's not what they're paying me for. So I never do that. I will if I'm like, okay, I think this specific aspect of the book needs strengthening. Can you find me 5 examples of places where this occurs in the manuscript? And again, like I read the manuscript, it just saves time. So that's the biggest line for me. And then kind of in line editing, I will put in at maximum a sentence. Maybe I'll give it a few sentences around it if I want it to have context, but I never go kind of paragraph by paragraph and say revise this and then plop that into the manuscript. Because again, like they're not paying me to use the tool. They're paying me to be the human there.
Yeah.
I'm a writer myself. I mean, I don't use it for my own writing actually either. I'm a pantser and I'm a discovery writer. I literally don't know what I think about something or what I'm trying to create until I am sitting there putting the words down. I write mostly nonfiction, so I'm like writing my way. I'm discovering my argument or my theme or whatever it is. There's actually no way for me to feel like, can you write me this piece about how the opening of this novel does this, this, and this? Because I don't know what it does yet. I'm like writing through it. Think about that a lot, just like how I use these tools as a writer and where my line is there. And that helps inform my line as an editor.
Now, a lot of your work, your nonfiction writing, is analysis of books and why particular things work. Do you ever decide to like run a comparison and have like, this is my opinion of the thing and let's see what the AI thinks of it and we can compare the two? Or have you ever been tempted?
I don't, because one of my bright lines is I don't upload any material that I don't have permission to upload, even to Claude. I try to believe that their privacy policies are what they say they are. But like Nnedi Okorafor has not given me permission to upload the first chapter of Death of an Author into Claude, and so I'm not going to do it. So that's a bright line for me. I am super curious. What I am doing, which has been really eye-opening and helpful, is I'm using Claude to generate bad examples, which are hard to come up with.
Oh, that's a clever idea. Yeah.
Yeah, as a teacher, it's such a great idea because you can really, whatever it puts out, even without telling it to make it bad, will be pretty flat. And then if you tell it to make it as cliched and generic as possible, it goes to town. It loves it and it's hilarious.
Finally, what I'm really good
Right.
at.
That's what I'm uniquely qualified for.
It truly is. It shines. Yes,
Yeah, that sounds like a great party game or something.
Yeah.
totally. Yeah.
Can you out cliche an AI?
Oh. Well, I feel like a lot of the people that are training it, they are ad copy people. I don't think they're hiring authors. Clearly, they're not paying them because some are suing them. They're not giving the best writing that humans are able to do. They are giving it really low ball, not necessarily great stuff. That's why it comes out with all this cliche stuff, especially if it starts using the internet. If it's like it's getting trained on blog posts and stuff, that's just not going to create good literature.
Well, yeah, I mean, these companies make enough money. They actually are very careful what they train the AIs on. So it's not just random. Like we talked in the podcast is going to come up pretty soon. We talked about how the AI can search things on the internet, but that is a context. That's not the training. Although, to go what Renee's saying, the AI is always going to be more generic because we're training it on the most common things and it's going to
Yeah.
pick the biggest patterns. Maybe we can fiddle around with certain settings, but it fundamentally is going to give the thing that's most comprehensible, most straightforward.
Yeah.
And often that's not unexpected. That's expected. We know what word's going to come next. So when we're
Right.
reading this email or this pitch or this summary, we don't have to work on trying to figure out what they're getting at because it's right there before us.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah, it all comes back to surprise. We did see some examples where it did kind of surprise us. We did a one story, right?
Mhm.
The one about the writer. We gave it a prompt and said, give us different plots. And one of the plots was like a writer who was really mean. Like they were an editor and they were super mean to everybody, except they couldn't bring themselves to publish their own book. And then somebody sends them a anonymous copy and it's their book. Somehow some anonymous person.
Ooh.
I don't know. I was like, okay, well, this is a surprising plot. Now, executed, it might come out pretty boring and flat, but the plot itself sounded kind of cool.
I think it's very easy as writers to point to the worst of AI or to the most generic of AI and say, well, obviously it can't do these things. And that's going to surprise us when it does.
Yeah, but I think there's just so much room to, I think, use these tools as tools. Like, I feel like some of the folks who are just rabidly anti-AI and will not touch it are kind of missing out on some things that, from a tool perspective, can just surprise and delight you. And I will tell you, my most recent favorite example is I went to a conference. I like taking handwritten notes. Like, that's how I keep my brain focused. I don't like typing on a computer, and I definitely don't like taking notes on my phone when someone's presenting at me because that feels kind of rude. And I just like the act of writing. But then I come home and I'm left with like pages of like messy notes. My handwriting is actually terrible. My own partner cannot read my handwriting. But I came home and I was like, oh, I have all these notes and I don't have time to like type it all up, figure it all out. And I had some photos I had taken of specific slides. And I was like, well, let me just see. One of my MOs right now is like, can Claude help me with this thing that feels staticky? And so I took photos of my handwritten notes. I wasn't planning to do this. They were, if anything, messier than usual, and uploaded that and my photos that I had taken of slides and gave it the website for the conference I was at and told it what panels I had gone to and asked it to generate my notes for me. And like 10 minutes later, I had this beautiful Google Doc with all of my notes and
No way.
the text from the slide. And then I was like, okay, this is amazing. All right, what follow-up items should I do? Or like, can you ask me some questions about these panels so I can kind of remember what I thought about them? And it asked me a bunch of questions and I put my answers to that in the notes. And then it suggested a bunch of follow-up steps. And I was like, no, I'm not going to message these people on LinkedIn, but thank you, Claude. I'm sure like that's a great suggestion. That was like surprise and delight for me of like, oh, and I actually enjoyed this. Like especially that Q&A part, I'm doing that increasingly, like giving it some context or giving it a Google Doc and saying, "Can you ask me some questions about this?" Like I do this a lot for like business decision things. Here's my calendar and I'm feeling too busy. Ask me some questions that will help like uncover a better way to do this or a better way to organize my schedule or whatever. And then Claude's not actually telling me what to do, but it's asking me questions that show me what I want to do and help me
Mm.
then make a decision.
Hmm.
The thing you did at the conference sounds fascinating because I also like to handwritten notes and then I have a notebook. I never go into it and it just sits there.
Exactly.
Like, what kind of questions did you ask it to ask you on like a panel?
Yeah. So I said, can you ask me questions about content and like what I agreed with and disagreed with about what the speaker said and about kind of the main topics? Like what I was trying to generate was, okay, like, I got this information. What did I think about it?
Okay, so like it would say this presenter had these comments about how to do an opening paragraph of your novel. So there were these three different types. Which type did you feel worked the best for you? That kind of thing?
That kind of thing. Or like, how would you apply this to your own work with authors?
Okay.
You can do kind of like a role playing thing. So type in your job right now is to like be an astute interviewer of me about my attendance at this conference and like ask questions that are designed to pull out my distinctive opinions about the material. You could ask it to be like, you're Terry Gross and your job is to interview me about my own book. Like, actually, I think it would be really good at that.
I love Terry Gross.
I know, right? Everyone loves Terry Gross. But we can't all be interviewed by her, sadly. So,
No, no.
You're my parent at the breakfast table and you're asking me what I got to do for the day.
oh yes.
Ooh.
What was your apple and your onion? Yeah.
Why did you choose to focus on this theme when, there was another one that you could have done, or something like that. And then you go, oh. Or maybe it finds a pattern, like, wow, you're really critical about this one specific thing. Can you elaborate on why you might feel that way? That would probably get me. It's like, damn it. Like it bubbled to the surface somehow.
Yeah.
Deep rooted thing that bothers me. I didn't even know it bothered me.
So, do you have any other questions, Renee?
Trying to think. I like this is really good. Like lots of tools. My brain is like, whoa, I'm gonna ask it to ask me questions. I'm gonna use it for this. I'm gonna use it for that. So I'm really excited because I've been using it as a workshop partner,
Yeah.
but I'm so sick of it being a yes man. And I've tried a lot of things to like, no, stop doing that. It still kind of does it, like no matter what I ask it. Then I get frustrated and I'm like, whatever, and I just let it go. And then I just do my own thing for a while until I feel stuck and then I try it again. So this might actually help a little bit more.
Yeah. The strengths and weaknesses question is always good. I mean, I do that as a human editor too, but then if you're asking specifically for both, you have a higher chance of getting to the weaknesses.
Yeah.
So, Renee's favorite question, read any good craft books recently?
Whoa.
Most people we ask, like they're like a writer and like, well, I used this craft book back in like 10 years ago and I've been still using it. But you're much more on the cutting edge of craft books. Any real new craft book that has come out recently that you think's good?
I know I have to turn to my bookcase. So I haven't read it yet, but the one that I want to read, and I've read enough of it to know that it's going to be great, is Matt Bell, Refused to Be Done. And it's a book about revising. I haven't like dug deeply into it yet, but that's going to be my next one. Right now I'm like really in the mode of like, let's learn from novels. So I am kind of doing like deep rereadings of novels right now. And that is teaching me a lot because even even writing advice can become like kind of crystallized into like conventional wisdom. And sometimes when you look, you'd really take apart a chapter that as a reader you've experienced as being very successful. They are breaking all of those rules. There is passive voice. There is, omniscient point of view or shifting point of view. Just going back to the novels themselves can teach you so much if you reread, right? And get in there, like mark up your books and underline them and ask questions of them. And yeah, I don't know, type a few sentences into Claude and say, like, walk me through how this works. Why does it work?
I actually experienced that just recently where I just got really angry. Like I was writing stuff and then I'm like, I'm pretty sure they're going to say it's cliche, or I'm pretty sure I'm using too many linking verbs or whatever. And then I'll read a piece and I'll be like, hey, they did it.
They got away with it.
Yeah, like F that, I'm doing it. Like I don't care. It took me a long time to actually get there because I'm one of those yes writers where it's like, oh, you marked it, something must be wrong with it. No matter what, it's like, well, they marked it, there's something wrong. I'll delete it, I'll change it or whatever. Even if there was nothing wrong with it, or at least it was a good stylistic choice. It could have been good, but I overly trust everything anybody else says. It's kind of nice to get to the point where you read things going, dude, I have been told not to do that. And it's right freaking there in like my favorite writing book, right? Or my favorite memoir, and I'm like, damn it, I'm doing it. I don't care. I'm undoing the fix of that person, that workshop member.
That would be a good craft book. Someone that basically says, let's break all the rules. And what they just do is they find books that do exactly what craft books tell you not to, and you say why it works. That'd be a great one for you to do, Kristen.
I know. I was going to say, y'all need to write it. I'll read it.
As a teacher, I used to tell students, I'm like, you know what? If you're going to say, oh, well, this author wrote a bunch of fragments, I'll be like, do you even know what a fragment is?
Yeah.
Because if not, you don't get to write a novel full of fragments. Or at least I'm going to correct the grammar.
Yeah. You need to know why the rule is there before you break it, right? So you know the impact of breaking it. And like why you're using passive voice in a certain sentence, right? Because you're trying to direct the reader's attention to a really specific part of the sentence and you're maybe trying to like leave something else a mystery. There has to be intention behind it. I think you have to know why you're doing it, and that takes practice and skill and knowledge too.
That would be a good book.
Is there anything that AI does right now that you absolutely hate as far as changes to writing or things like that or options?
I have to say I hate the emojis. ChatGPT is more prone to this than Claude. And actually, I think I've told Claude that I'm like not, I'm not like a big emoji fan. I mean, you ask ChatGPT something and it's like, sure. And it's like in bullet points with like an emoji for each one. And I'm like, I don't know. Do I need the nail painting emoji? Like, do I need to see this every day? I do not need it in my life every day. It feels just a little like glib and silly. I think that's it for me.
I don't know what episode it was, like 3, 4 episodes ago. I told ChatGPT to please talk to me like an adult. Thank you. I was pissed. Like, why is it talking to me this way? I'm not like 12.
Yeah, it just, it can be just sands things down and it can just be really boring. Sometimes that's what you want if you're just writing an email or summarizing something. And sometimes I think it makes it too polished and happy and I don't know, like the most interesting writing always has some kind of weird loose thread where you're like, what is this about? That's the kind of stuff I love. Even when I'm reading an email, I don't know, here's like a little tiny bit of like hidden aggression, like interesting. Like
Yeah.
I like that. I like spotting it and those tools will strip it right out, which for some people it's good if they need to write less aggressive emails, but like I find human beings absolutely fascinating and using an AI tool does make us sound less distinctive and individual and weird. And weird is always interesting. That's I think my pet peeve. Let's all just be weird together.
Thank you so much. This has been a great conversation. Before we go, could you tell us a little bit about your new book and also about the Blue Garret?
Oh, thanks. Yeah. So you can kind of find everything at thebluegarret.com. Book is called Novel Study, and it does deep dives into 10 different recent novels, just kind of taking apart how they work. I tried to be really specific and like fine grained, like what is in a scene? Like what what are our components here and like what percentage are they in different novels? And not that you can write by numbers because you can't, but just like let's see what's here in the scene and how it's working. And then I'm also running a novel study book club on Patreon. So we're doing Wild Dark Shore right now by Charlotte McConaughey, which is a fabulous book and full of surprises. And then next month we're doing a total 180. We're picking things solely off the bestseller list. So we're going to do the latest Emily Henry novel. I'm expecting that we'll talk about how you maintain surprise even when readers know that happy ending is coming at the end, which is the real hat trick that all romance writers need to pull off. So it's just, even if you're not writing romance, that's an interesting thing to look at. Come join that if you want to kind of nerd out about books with other story nerds.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. This has been great.
Yeah, thanks for having me again.
Yeah, you're always great.
All right, bye y'all.
Words to Write By is produced by Renee Nelson and Kim Smiga Adam. Our theme music is Roll Back the Carpet by Cool Cat Music. Have a great day.
Great work, man, or woman, or person, whatever. Dude, yeah.